Originally, the middle school kind of trivia thing is that the green represents the forests, the yellow represents the gold, and the blue represents the skies of Brazil. But of course, that's actually just to make a nation have a more beautiful flag. It's two flags, one in front of the other, of the two founding royal families of Brazil, the family Bragança. Later on, I do have some pictures of that flag. Brazil is the 9th largest GDP in the world. It's just behind France with $1.5 trillion, I mean. And that's all exporting commodities, so coffee, a lot of minerals and all in that area. It's the 5th largest country in the world, so it's very comparable to the United States. And a lot of people don't notice that Brazil is so large that the Amazon rainforest is just the top. It's almost nothing compared to the rest of the country. And Brazil is a Portuguese-speaking country because that's the only place in South America that was colonized by the Portuguese. So we speak Portuguese, not Spanish, as a lot of people think about Brazil. I find it interesting to put a bit of history, just a few facts. Brazil was colonized by the Portuguese, by especially the family of Bragança. It had 2 kings, Dom Pedro I and Dom Pedro II, and one queen, Queen Isabella. And that's the flag I mentioned beforehand. That's the flag of Bragança. You can see it's very similar to the Brazilian flag, except by the center. And that was created with the beginning of Brazil as a republic later on, after the monarchy. And Brazil got its independence in 1822, and there's a very interesting story behind that. Coming to Brazil, the royal family was escaping from Napoleon, because apparently the first king of Brazil was the only person in that time frame to trick Napoleon for the whole time. He kept making commerce with England, and Napoleon did not know that. So after he discovered, he invaded Portugal, and the royal family had to flee to Brazil, and that's how Brazil got some more political influence. And also in Brazil, slavery was abolished later on in 1888. Some other facts is that Brazil, to this day, is very economically entrenched with the United States of America. And during the Great Depression, Brazil was thrown down because our only and major source of income was selling coffee to the United States. So after you stopped buying coffee from Brazil, our economy just plummeted too. And another fact that is not really well known is that Brazil went through a 21-year dictatorship between 1964 and 85. So that was very recent, and not a lot of people know that. They all think Brazil is mostly a republic for all our recent history. I find it necessary to show some tourist attractions because Brazil is such a country known by its sights. First of all, this is a thing from my region, from the states of Minas Gerais. It's the Tiradentes Church. The interior of the church is completely made out of gold that the Portuguese extracted from our region, and it is named after one of the separatist movement heroes in Brazil, because in a lot of moments, because of the monarchy, Brazil was trying to get some independence from that and become a republic. So my state tried to separate itself from Brazil, and Tiradentes was one of the heroes to that revolution, and one of the only national heroes Brazil has to this day. We also have the statue of Christ the Redeemer located in Rio. It's about some 12, 13 feet tall, standing on a mountain because Brazil does not have any mountains. So it's one of the most well-known sites of Brazil. Then we have the Copacabana Beach, also located in Rio. It's one of Rio's liveliest neighborhoods. It's a semicircle that goes around the sea. It's a beautiful place. And the walkway off the Copacabana beach is one of the most well-known sites in Brazil too. And then we have the Sambadrome. This happened just in the middle of February, so not so long ago. There we go. And the streets of Rio are just completely closed out for the celebration of our Mardi Gras. Would be the same kind of thing, but it's a week-long celebration before Lent, and it's just a beautiful parade from those streets. It just completely closes up the city. It's a beautiful sight. Then soccer, because I have to mention soccer. I personally, it's not my favorite sport, but it's Brazil, for one. We won the World Cup 5 times, the largest number of times to win the World Cup. In Brazil, right now we have over 600 professional teams of soccer. And worldwide known athletes come from Brazil, like Neymar, Pelé, who was one of the best players of the world for the longest time, and Ronaldinho Gaúcho, who is one of the Brazilian legends of football. Then we have the Amazon rainforest. Everyone knows it. Brazil is known for our forests. It has 20% of the world's clear water, consumable water in the Amazon basin. So it's a big reserve of water that we have in Brazil. And it's it's home for half of the species known to man. So a lot of species that you connect to, Brazil has it, but just in that area of the rainforest. It's massively populated, and recently has had some problems of deforestation, but the Brazilian government has been trying to stop that. Also in the Amazon rainforest, we have to mention the Amazon River. It's the second longest river in the world and the largest river in discharge to the ocean. It connects 2 rivers in the beginning of its routes, and it just continues. So there's this one area where the water is completely blue and completely dark, and they just intermingle and keep going. It's a beautiful place. Brazilian wildlife, just because this is so entrenched with our culture. Even our bills for our currency, the real, have different animals in each bill. So for the $20 bill, the 20 reais bill, we have the jaguar. Then we have the golden lion tamarin for the 50 bill, and the tapir is one of the largest rodents in the world. Then we have the Boto. The Boto is not included in the bills, but he is a mythical animal for Brazil. We have a legend of a pink Boto that just leaves the water during the night and goes partying and then returns to the water as a Boto. We have the Macau, which is one of the national birds of Brazil. And we have the sloth, because my host dad wanted me to put the sloth there. It's all his idea. It's also a very well-known Brazilian animal. And some Brazilian food. A while back I did a Brazilian dinner. Well, I didn't cook it, Martha did. She's way better at cooking than me, even in my national foods. But those are just some most well-known foods. This slide is mostly from my region, except the brigadeiro. That is Brazilian candy. It's chocolate. It's really good. Then we have the cheese bread. It's kind of self-explanatory. It's bread, and its consistency is made with cheese. It's really good too. We have the tropeiro beans. It's very consistent, and it gets the tropeiro name from the colonizers that went inside of Brazil, kind of like the expansion to the west in the United States. The people that did that in Brazil created that meal because it's so consistent that you can just make it very fast and have everything that you need for a day. We have the roll cake. That's one of my favorites. It's a very thin outside crust with different types of fillings. That, for example, is very well known in Argentina as doce de leite. I don't know if anyone has had that. It's really good. We have the feijoada, which is known all throughout Brazil. It's one of the Brazilians' most made dishes. It was originated by actually slaves. They didn't have good parts of the pig because the slave owners just gave them rests. So they just would connect black beans and just rest the pig, like ear, nose, and just different parts, and just wrap it up into a dish. It's also really good. And we have the Brazilian barbecue, which you call churrasco. Anyone ever went to a Brazilian steakhouse? How'd you like it? Yeah, it's basically nationwide that every Sunday we do one of those. We just gather a group of friends and just make barbecue. So Brazil is very serious about our meat. So it's been kind of difficult to come here and eat ground beef for most of the year. It's good that Martha is a really good cook, but Brazilian meat is taken very seriously, and we do that very consistently. Some famous personalities. Brazil doesn't have many heroes, as I mentioned before, but in more recent years, a lot of figures have become very prominent in Brazil, so that two of those we even call kings. The first one is Pelé. We call him the king of football, or soccer in Brazil, you know. And that's Roberto Carlos. He's the king of music. Every New Year's time, we start playing his music. There isn't one year in Brazil that I haven't heard his music all around. He's one of Brazil's most famous musicians. And then we have Maurício de Souza. He is a comic strip artist, and it's almost tradition for the children that are starting to read his books. So he's kind of a Dr. Seuss for Brazil. And his works are starting to be published both in English and in Spanish recently. That's Paulo Coelho. He wrote The Alchemist. That was a bestseller a while back. He published it, I think, in the United States, but he's originally Brazilian. Ayrton Senna. He is my personal hero for sports. Yeah, Formula One. He is a beast. He was a beast. He unfortunately passed away very young, but he did a whole lap in a race with a manual car. So he was putting all the pressure to change engines for the whole race. By the end, he was almost dead. He was really unhydrated, and at some point of the race, he sat and saw God, and that's why he kept going and finished the lap. So there are many stories of him telling that. He's a big Brazilian figure for us. In politics, that's our president. Most people call him Dracula. You can see the resemblance. He's personally not my favorite person, especially because he was not elected. Brazil had a process of impeachment with our last president, so he was put in place as her vice president, and he is very right wing. That has kind of been good for Brazil, but he has been privatizing a lot of Brazilian industry, so it's kind of half and half for who likes and who doesn't. And Brazil has a federal constitution, so it's kind of different from the United States that has a main constitution, but each state has a different rules, meaning you have different laws for each state. Brazil has a federal, just complete constitution, so it doesn't change. And Brazil, all throughout the years, has had 8 constitutions, 7 if you do not count the one that lasted 2 days. But it has been kind of a staple in Brazil that we always change our constitution, and that kind of just leaves room to a lot of corruption that we do have in Brazil, and I find it necessary to mention this. And also, Brazil is a federal government, meaning you have a president. It's ruled by a nation instead of each state, and we have 26 states, 27 counting with the federal district. And in the flag of Brazil, we have 26 stars under the banner of order and progress, and one over, which means the federal district. A school system, I was asked by my school to mention this because I did a presentation there too, but just explaining very quickly. The preschool is optional. It goes from 3 to 6 years. First, we have the nursing school, which is just kind of a beginning, just a care house. Then we have the kindergarten for 4 to 6, and all this is optional for the kids. Then we have the fundamental education, and here on until the upper secondary education, it's all compulsory for children. And it goes from 6 years old to 18, that's a typo. And after that, we have higher education, colleges, master's degrees, and PhDs. A fact about Brazilian colleges is that most of them are state-controlled, so it's basically free, but it's very difficult to get into because of two facts. We both have a test, a standardized test called ENEM, which happens once a year, and it covers all your school curriculum. So it's mathematics, languages, sciences, and histories. It's everything crammed into a 2-day test, and you have to do that and get basically a scoring for you to be able to join a college. And you also have to go through a vestibular, which is basically a test that each college makes themselves to rate students that can go there or not. And Brazil has a standard curriculum, so we don't have any electives. It's all just a main core course, which includes just languages like Portuguese, English, Spanish, sciences, biology, physics, and chemistry, and just all this very academic curriculum that is very boring at most times.
Do you have some music or?
No, my school is actually implementing music this year because they are they're reforming the whole school, and they're applying new electives because the Brazilian school system is just about to change or not. We really don't know because we have Congress. We know how it's difficult. A lot of laws just take a long while to pass, and we still do not have the infrastructure to do that. So for now, it's just a basic curriculum. And we have a federal district, much like Washington, D.C. Brasilia was built to be Brazil's capital as a federal district, disattached from a state. And it was completely modeled for that one reason. So if you look here, an aerial vision of the city, it's formed in the format of a plane.
Right.
It has the little format of a plane with the houses and all. And that's our the Planalto, which is the building where everything really goes on, where Congress meets and all. You can't talk about Brazil without mentioning Rio. It's the Brazilian city, from what most people know, and it's Brazil's major melting pot for culture. It's the main city for Carnival, so that's one of the reasons it's mostly well known. And it's, in my opinion, Brazil's music capital, because most music that Brazil has either starts or expands from Rio. And it also hosted the World Olympics in 2016, so that's very recent. And a lot of news from the city came out to the world. We do have a very difficult problem with violence, and the Brazilian government has been trying to tackle that for years. And that includes the favela, which this Rotary has a lot of connection to, actually. You help school inside the favela for how many years now?
13.
13 years.
Since 2006.
Yeah, that long. Nowadays, nowadays the favela is officially a neighborhood. It's not a slum anymore, but it does still have a lot of violence. It has been taken back a lot because in 2010 and 2017, Brazil ran gigantic security military operations there, and a lot of that violence just toned down, but it's still a very rough area. However, it's one of Brazil's most well-known sites, and it's beautiful. You look an aerial vision of the city, the area, and it's just all different colored houses. It's very vibrant and very beautiful. For whoever saw the Simpsons Brazilian episode, you would see the favela kind of like that. But we do not have colored snakes. São Paulo, it's Brazil's biggest city. It's just a gigantic economic metropolis for Brazil. It's the 13th largest city in the world per population with 12 million people. It's a cosmopolitan melting pot. So what here in the US you would see in New York as all the cultures that came to the US just aligned and having all these different nationalities shown, São Paulo is the equivalent to Brazil. We have Arabic, Italian, Japanese communities that live there and just bring this livelihood to Brazil. My family comes from Italy, so I kind of see that from that vision. And it's a lot of different little cultures that intermingle to create a country much like the United States. The Southwest region, that's my region, but first of all, I just want to mention that the Amazon rainforest just encompasses this area of Brazil. So all this area is a different biome. This is a more kind of a savanna biome. This is a very frigid area. This is very dry, and most of the beaches come from this area where you know them for. And this area right here, I did not put this in the slide because otherwise it would be too long, but it has a major drought because we have a big mount. We don't have any mountains, but we have a big mount that keeps the oceanic humidity to come to that area, so it's slowly becoming a desert. And this region, in red over there, it has 4 states: Minas Gerais, São Paulo, Rio, and Espírito Santo. I'm not going to translate it. It's kind of weird to explain. And it produces 60% of Brazil's GDP. So that's the major economic region for Brazil. That's where the cities of Rio, São Paulo, and Belo Horizonte, which is my state's capital, are located in. And that's my state, Minas Gerais. It's big. It's really big. It's just over the size of California and not too under the size of Texas. It's the 30th largest GDP in Brazil, and its major economic income is iron and niobium. I'll explain what niobium is afterwards, but it's basically just mining. And we have a lot of hydropower in that area because of the rivers that just go down there and in the Amazon. So both agriculture and mineral extraction are major parts of this state. So we produce sugar canes, beans, fruits, and coffee. And I cannot emphasize more, what you have here is not coffee. I've got a shipment of coffee from Brazil, and I've been so much more energized than I have for all this time, and I've been suffering from a coffee withdrawal. And especially coming from this state, Brazil takes a lot of emphasis in our coffee. It's very strong, and it honestly just tastes a little bit better. And also we have a lot of iron, like a lot. 206 million tons. This I think was either what we have there right now or what we take yearly. I don't know. I don't remember. And we have 73.5% of the niobium worldwide. So we almost have a monopoly, rivaling with China and Canada, I want to say. And this is my city. Its name comes from native origins from the tribes over there, and it means where you first see the sun. It's located just over 200 miles of Belo Horizonte, which is our state's capital that I mentioned before, and it has 110,000 inhabitants. It's over the size of Front Royal in population, but we do not have the same facilities. So we wouldn't have a Walmart, a Target, you know. Brazil doesn't have this major companies, which I'll mention later on too. Now the niobium. Niobium is a mineral essential to space travel. You make an alloy with steel, and it's the only thing that keeps the space shuttles from burning while coming into orbit. So we have one of the largest mines in the world in my city. So most of the space shuttles that went to space have a piece of my city in them. Yeah, it's pretty neat. And surprisingly enough, cheese. My city is really well known by its cheese. It's like worldwide known. It won last year a competition in France where it won 2 medals. And I have to mention, I'm legally bound to do this by a friend of mine, that it's my city and a city of Sacramento, also in that state. They both cooperate into making this cheese. So kind of the milk comes from there, but it's produced in my city.
Is it goat cheese or cow cheese? What kind of cheese?
It's fresh cheese, I want to say.
What animal?
Yeah.
What animal
What
does
animal?
it come from?
It comes from a cow. Yeah,
Okay.
cow. And it's really good. That's Ferry Rotary Club back in our shop. We have a building just for Rotary, and that's because my grandfather built it like some 30 years ago. Yeah, him and his friends just began this centralization of our Rotary Club back there. And nowadays, it has different programs like the wheelchair bank. In our city, all wheelchairs come from the Rotary Club, so everything is basically free, and we do different gatherings and rise up money to buy those wheelchairs. With the flower campaign and Brazil's nationwide Women's Day, we just sell flowers to women just to be able to raise some money. We have a scholarship bank that helps people to study and go to college in Brazil. And we have Oktoberfest that I mentioned before. Brazil has a lot of Germanic and European influence, so my Rotary Club has an Oktoberfest. It runs an Oktoberfest in my city. And this I added more recently because I have had this slide since I came here, but this last slide I added just because of what I've seen so far in my exchange. And there are some differences and connections that we have between Brazil and the United States. First of all, it's the way to greet. In Brazil, don't be scared when they just hug you first time you see them. We are usually very open people, and we do not just do handshakes. We're really, very connected. And that really came from French influence, Portuguese influence. Then we have proximity of figures of authority. Here in the United States, I was very surprised that I have to call my teachers Mr., Mrs., and Miss, because in Brazil it's much more connected. It's much more openly, a more open relationship between students and teachers. So I do tell the story that my chemistry teacher, 90% of the things he says in class is swearing. It's kind of funny when you're just doing chemistry and you don't know what is a term of chemistry or a swear. He's a very funny guy.
I'm not his chemistry teacher.
You look like him, but you're not him. And another thing about Brazil and the US is that I was very enlightened to see how many social gatherings and community gatherings you have here just for fundraising or really to have some fun in different events. Brazil doesn't have as many community gatherings, and that has been really nice coming here to see that. Then big brands. we kind of do not have that. We have more centralized supermarkets or markets, so we wouldn't find a Walmart with everything just stuffed inside. And that's kind of different. The major thing in Brazil are supermarkets, but we do not have any big brands. And another thing, especially living in the country here, is distances. It's kind of different to live 15 minutes away from a city, being that I lived in a town in Brazil, so everything was in walking distance. And that has two sides of it. First of all, I love the silence. I love being able to live in the country and have this just nature surrounding me. But it is kind of difficult for transportation to do stuff. And in Brazil, it's much easier to do that, especially because we have public transportation. I made this kind of smaller and shorter so that I had some time in the end for questions. So whoever has any questions about Brazil, anything really, I'll be happy to answer.